All righty, so we need to approve some minutes.
All right, you want to open the meeting?
Recording in progress.
Recording. Okay.
So in regard to Thomas's request about getting more information in advance of the meeting to be better prepared or intelligent, I think this is a good example. This we should have had out a week ago.
Okay, I can print them or I could email them to you individually. They are up on the town website.
Now, how come we've got unanimous approval of 5-0 and then majority approval of 401, but then some of the 401s are unanimous?
Yeah, I see one that's not unanimously approved. It's 401 and
There's a couple of them.
yep, okay, I got two. I'll switch those.
There's one on the front page that I saw.
There's 1, 2, 3 on the front, 4 on the front. Well, but the one's manipulated, so 3 that are say anonymous, anonymous. Anonymous.
Any comments on this?
No, not for me.
Wait for more responses.
Looks good to me.
Good. You want to make a motion?
A motion to approve the minutes,
With those two changes.
those two changes.
A
Anybody
second?
want a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And by the way, do we need to note who voted which way? Isn't that the case?
And we'll record that.
Yeah, I'll change that as well.
So I'd like to make a couple of comments based on these minutes. This is very minor, but it had been brought up by one of the local retailers that the flags that are being flown are at such an angle that you can't read the open. And we talked about this and that Mr. Williams of the Department of Public Works might have signs that are of a different angle because that's what he uses for the American flags on the poles in town. And could we get one of those so that we can give it to this particular retailer to see if that makes her happier? And if so, try to do more.
You know, there's always the choice of the up and down banner as well. It's the banner, it just hangs, it says open straight down. It's narrower, but because of the way it's shaped, it doesn't fold up as much as a longer flag would. So, those banners can hang straight out and down versus at an angle. I mean, I know we've already discussed all of this, but it's just something that we could, if it's continues to be a problem, look into.
I believe, sorry, I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, I believe there is a retailer in town doing that.
With the straight up and down banner?
Yeah, it's a really small one.
Yeah.
It gets the same exact color as the building.
Does it bother you?
No, in fact, I like that one.
Yeah.
I love the opinion.
I like that one.
If it's green and it says open, I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I voted no on that was not to say that I don't think that we should push this to the select board to say that open signs are should not be permitted. It was that I just feel like for uniformity, we should have stuck with one. So it's my hope that the select board will look at that and go, oh, maybe we should think about just, because they can make minor changes once they've received it.
Do you think they'll really change it?
I don't know.
I think they
I
might just
haven't had a
rubber stamp it.
Discussion with anyone at all, to be honest.
There's something else I want to talk about too.
It's range letting you.
It comes up with E-frame signs and it talks about more public input, which we got to figure out how to get. And then we, at some point, do we want to? Oh, it is next thing on the agenda. Has everybody read Thomas's?
Yes,
Yes.
and it's very good. I have one thing that in it that I see may become a problem. But, I don't know any instances where it would be, but it could be because of the way it's worded. And it's all allowing multiple A-frames on a single corner when a building is off of the road.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we could have 6 A-frames crowding a corner of a single street and when you have, especially in the Depot Street area, where everything's back off the road, we could have just a big pile of A-frames. And it might behoove us, if that's the case, areas like that, to allow a single A-frame with open on top, and then they slide there.
Oh, like at the Green Mountain
Yeah,
where the
yeah,
curves used to be.
right, and they slide the name of the business in. I mean, it's just something to think
We were
about.
discussing exactly this about 10 minutes before everybody got here. I think I made the suggestion to Peter before everybody got here about this issue.
Yeah,
We got to figure out a better way of doing these A-frames, because everybody's putting out an A-frame in the morning and it's part of their sign, and it's not really correct.
right.
But let's just say at the little shopping center that you mentioned across Thai Basil, in front of the Baptist church, maybe on their property, somewhere down on Depot Street, probably twice. If you had that type of thing that advertises what's happening, especially the horse show
Mhm.
or the garlic festival or the whatever thing's going on, I think that's something we really should look at.
Yeah.
There's an example of a kiosk that's in Adams Park already. It's like a 3-sided, it's got a nice wood shaker roof. It's got the old movie theater type casement that you can open up and insert a poster type of thing. So that might be something that you're referring to, right? So we could put one in the green across from Polo. We could put one in the Green Mountain Shops. We could put one, there's already one in Adams Park. And perhaps another location. The A-frame signs I have a particular problem with only because of, and I think we should make a distinction between an event, something that's being advertised like the Dorset Players has a change of the play that's available for that week. And I think a 2-week window is probably adequate time to advertise that. I'm no expert. But what I want to do is to kind of remove the same message from the store owners, which seems to circumvent the sign ordinance. So if you're putting the same messages out every single day with no changes, that's really just more of the same. And I don't know how to address the people who may be off of like Elm Street. And maybe it's more in keeping with the Green Mountain Shops, a list of the shops that are available that way
Right.
with an arrow.
Yes.
I'm just kind of spitballing this right now.
Yeah, that I think that looks better than having 6, A-frames on a corner when you drive by.
Absolutely.
And when the A-frames, the whole idea originally behind those, when we decided on those, was to have people, like a restaurant, put it out for specials, or if there's a sale at a store, like a 40% off sale, put it out and people know your sale's going on. That's not really just it's not an open sign. It's not like we're open, it's more of a, this is what's going on today at our place. And that was the original idea behind it. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent open sign.
This was what was supposed to happen with those. you're supposed to get, this, you go to the town and you get approval for a sign and it's for a certain date.
Mhm.
And, we've let it go.
Yeah, back in the day before the online registration, there was a small sticker that would go on your sign for a temporary. So that means you've already been to the zoning administrator and
Right.
gotten it kind of approved, basically.
And the idea was to keep for everybody from having signs out just willy-nilly, and that was that.
Right. We go to the online registration and not only people are not registering the online sign, the online A-frames, but they're saying, well, that store down here is no different from me. I'm going to put mine out. So,
Yeah.
and that's an enforcement problem, right? So.
It was a problem for you.
Conversation, have you registered the sign? And I want to say we have maybe a dozen or 24 people have legitimately registered the A-frame sign. There's more than that on the street today. So
So how do we come up with this concept of having 4 or 5 or 6 places in town where there's this, what's happening now and also directional sign concept?
I'd like to kind of pick John Byrne's brain on what he thinks of that kiosk scenario, and maybe they'd like to kind of adopt that. Look, I don't want to spend anybody's money, but if this is something that it's going to solve a problem of the A-frame signs or getting visual with a local business and pointing people in the right, and maybe it's an electronic bulletin board. I don't know. We have those out here in the town hall. We have one at the library. We have one over at the rec park, and they seem to be working pretty effectively. The problem with something like that is you have to kind of stare at that thing till it circulates. And it's like between 30 seconds and 15 seconds. So one might be too fast, one might be too slow.
You're driving by, you might miss it.
Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is, but there's a lot of things that we kind of can help explore. And I'd like to kind of take the lead from the business association to see what their thoughts are.
So can you coordinate with John and try to get a start to this concept and then come back and we'll talk about it again? Or do people want to talk more now at all?
I just have one comment. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Reading the town plan, we want more business, we want more this, we want more that. This seems like a lot of regulations about signs, and does this hurt getting more retail in this place?
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think it's got to be a lot shorter and simpler, your thing.
Oh, you're talking about the draft that I wrote?
Yeah.
So you're not hurting my feelings. So what I was trying to do, and just to be
I
clear,
thought it was great input.
this is just to put something out there. And the theory behind it for me was to think about A-frame signs from an equity standpoint versus an equality standpoint. So, and the difference there to me is that if we're saying, if we're going to permit A-frames, regardless of what the rules are now or what the rules may be at some point, I would personally rather us look at it from the point of view of, one, not everyone needs an A-frame sign. So just as an example, if your business is quite literally up against a main road, I'm not sure that you need an A-frame sign unless it is very explicitly for a very short-term
Sale,
say, and maybe
Special-
even it maybe,
yeah,
yes.
event.
So allowing, I don't want to, I'm not suggesting anything here, but if you're allowing or permitting every single business to have an A-frame, regardless of where their business is located, to me, that's a version of equality. So everyone has the equal ability to go out and do something. But we're not taking into account not only the idea, but the reality that there are a number of businesses that either can't find a location that's on the main road, can't afford to pay for a location that's on the main road, may be kind of off the beaten path, but and may not even have the ability to have any signs other than an A-frame. So when I was thinking about it, I was trying to, again, exclude the equality portion of it and think about it from an equity standpoint. So the draft that I put together, yes, it's long. There's a lot of, I think there's 2 tiers. I think at one point I even had 3 tiers. So there are I think there are a number of ways to look at this. So if a business is right on the main road, maybe, just a suggestion, maybe they don't need A-frame signs to say I'm open or I'm running this. Sales not the right word, but if you're right on the road, I'm not sure that you need one every single time. But if you're through one parking lot and then through another, however many feet that might be, maybe that's where a more regular / temporary A-frame sign seems more appropriate.
And that-
These are individuals who don't have the ability to have a large sign.
And I agree,
Not have a
I
permanent location.
completely agree, because those businesses don't have the visibility that other businesses have.
Correct.
But I was thinking that, like I said, simple A-frame that has the names on this, like slots and with the open on top and an arrow pointing down the street to let people know those businesses are back there. That would be a little bit easier than 5 or 6 on a corner.
That's the type of thing that you want to talk to John about, right?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that we're talking about is the kiosks that would give the event type space to, hey, this is happening this week. Great play at Dorset Players, come see us. And the other one is making directional signs for people who are off of the main street, down Elm Street, for instance, that this shop is available and open at this time.
Right.
Karen?
So we're right on Route 7. And we're using an A-frame sign to direct people to go out back to the back patio. So
But it's seasonal for you, but it's not a year-round thing.
right, but
So
I
that's-
just wanna
That was the
bring
idea.
to your attention that we do use it. People don't look at it, they don't follow it, and they go to the front door, but we do have one out.
And the idea is not to be out all year long, every day as a sign. It's sort of these are temporary, A-frames are temporary signs for the most part. And
I think it's an interesting issue because knowing that parking lot, people don't go where they should go. They in effect want to come right to your front door or park right next to your building, and you can't do that. And so directing them back there, parking for, what's the name of the restaurant now?
The cold cap,
And yours. No, I meant the other restaurant. There used to be the,
Noms,
is that what it's called now?
uh-huh,
But parking for both of those entities is basically behind their building, right?
correct.
And people don't go there.
No, people are going behind the buildings to park, there just isn't enough parking.
So basically, all you need is a parking and an arrow sign.
I'm directing people to go to the cold cap, to go to the window behind the building to get their ice cream.
So what about parking?
Are gonna people just pull in, but I've ordered individual signs for each parking space since it's limited parking.
Alrighty, back to the issue we were talking about. So you're gonna talk to John Burnham about the whole issue we just talked about, discussed.
I'd like to talk about the kiosk placement and the directional signs.
And also the concept of a business that is very visible on the main road may have a different need than a business that is at the back of a parking lot.
Correct. And to Jonathan's point that there are in existence some businesses that the right of way for the town goes right up to the building. So they have no opportunity to put a sandwich board out in front of their store. Maybe there's a trade-off. Maybe if you don't have the room, maybe you're allowed a little extra window space. I don't know.
It would be my suggestion that if anybody here wanted to help you, that would be productive, right?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Anything else on the minutes? I have a couple.
You say Jonathan, did you mean?
I'm sorry.
We get that all the time.
See, you
Doesn't
really-
matter where we are.
forgive me, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just.
RVs and campers on the bottom of the page. Are we anywhere on that?
What was needing to be done? I remember we had, basic outline and we did Thomas did a few changes, sorry, a few changes to it. And then I don't remember where we went after that. It was a few months back.
That either.
It's okay. Did we talk about the fact that the ordinances are fairly explicit on this?
Yeah, there was a part in the ordinance I thought would speak to that. I don't know if I could find it right now.
We don't have to get an answer to that right now, but can we put it on a to-do list?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then rural zoning density, we're gonna talk about that tonight. And then short-term rentals. I don't know where to go with that, except I keep on hearing that the state may want to create their own
Sure he's got it.
rules on that.
But it's always good to get in before the state so that we have our rules in place, so they circumvent what comes after. Because we have grandfather our rules in, that's
So
essentially.
you want to do that?
Would like to have a registration so we register all short-term rentals in town here at the town office. And then I want to be able to cap how many registrations we allow, how many we allow in town. So that we don't have every single house that comes up for sale immediately become a new short-term rental. Because I have seen
That issue exists,
it exists and it's eating up the market.
but also we don't have the problem as bad as some other places.
We don't, but we have it pretty bad. I've seen 3 houses in my neighborhood in the past few years go from families to short-term rentals. Last weekend, I had to listen to some frat boys watching a football game or a baseball game or something with the door open, screaming loudly every time there was a goal or something happened. It was no peace all day. And that's the kind of thing that's happening now. So
I have a good deal of information on this that has been offered to me by Andy Tarantino. And I will distribute it to you. And Andy, even though he has short-term rentals, he has a very realistic approach to it. And he even thinks there should be a fee. And he's gotten a lot of information. Unfortunately, some of it not great, like Woodstock just turned down the proposal that their governing body, select board or planning commission, whatever came up with.
yeah, a lot of the proposals that he is putting forth, I mean, some of them are good, but they're put forth by a housing lobby. And the lobby is a short-term rental lobby that is creating this stuff. And it sounds good on the surface, but some of it is actually
That
hindering.
is 100% true.
Yeah,
Okay, I had a slightly different perspective on that. For example, he thinks there should be a fee, which
I agree.
I think, I was surprised that somebody who is on that side of the fence thought there should be a fee, but I will gather the information because maybe it's helpful. Now, who's going to, was it you and Thomas that were going to talk about this or not?
About the RVs or the short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals, or are we all doing that?
I mean, we can all do it, or, I mean, I don't mind I can work with, Meg if she wants to, anybody who wants to work with it. I mean, I think it's a simple thing of just us creating a registration here at town office. And then, figuring out how many we want to allow per capita in town.
Do you know how the village is doing with their registration?
Last I heard was long ago, they didn't have any response. They thought there were something like 18 in the village, but nobody was responding to their request or directive that they wanted.
Well, you can easily institute a fine if they're found doing it without being registered.
That's what I was gonna say.
That,
Yeah, and then that's more money, just like the registration fee. It's pays for
It is.
Peter's time to go find them.
it is quasi a new job responsibility because I think it was Heidi, it says in here, thinks that there are 200 or 300
Yeah,
of them in town. I'm
There are.
not sure.
there's hundreds.
There are 200 to 300. I'm not sure 5. But that's superficial information, I would say. But if you're going to monitor and police and get monies and information from these people, filling it out properly, that's a lot of time.
Well, we would require them to come in and register, and we could also cap how many there are. So we could say issue 200 homes, 3 bedrooms a home, that's 600 people. Our town's 4,000, that's a big percentage of our
I'm not
population.
arguing with that. I'm just saying that to take care of 200 applications and police them is a lot of work.
Well, yeah,
And then you got the sewer and water issue too.
right. So we can write those rules in.
Let me just add that, yes, it would take a lot of time, but sometimes particularly an issue where we're talking about housing and where I personally think housing touches quite literally everything in our community. It touches crime, it touches employment opportunities, it touches all of our local businesses. It touches even just the general sense and feel of belonging to a community. So I'm not suggesting that we move in one direction or the other, but yes, taking action on something like this will take time. It will take staff time. It will take our time. It will take the select board's time. But if we choose to do nothing, it will continue to have, I feel very strongly, a very negative long-term impact on our community. And it's not just someone being able to find a house to rent or being able to move from one house to the next if they want to buy it. It quite literally impacts everything that I just listed. So I understand that it would, if it fell to you, it would be a lot of work. But sometimes that's just the work we have to do.
Would you be willing to do some work on this?
I would, but the last time that we've discussed this, it was kind of squashed at one point. And I felt like we had started heading in a direction where we were interested in looking at a registry or at least gathering information, and then that was just kind of.
If you're
So
referring to me,
yes,
I
I
would say that
would, but
I was not aware of what you just said about if the state, if we do it in advance of the state, we have the authority.
These are our
And,
rules, and
um,
yeah,
I was under the impression that if the state does it, then whatever work we've done on it are wasted. Do you know?
Well, we get our power from the state, so the state says, this is what you're able to do. I'm just basing it on that.
it's probably unless the state's more restrictive, right?
Well,
I don't know.
we could start a registration without a doubt. Make it very simple, right? And look for voluntary compliance.
What about going to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns?
VLCT.
and Getting some guidance on that to see whether if we are in advance of the state, whether we can continue to have our own rules or not. Any other issues on this?
it'd be nice also just to have in the registration a requirement only 2 people per bedroom. That way we keep the sewer and water under control. We don't want a room with 4 bunk beds in it. And,
Big issue.
yeah,
What about fire and safety?
Absolutely. I believe, Karen, that that's a state requirement.
Yeah.
That they have to comply to.
There is a house at Ormsby Hill. She rents it out every winter, short-term rental. It has to be 6 months under the HOA. For people out of town that come in on the weekends to ski, and there will be 20 people over there. I mean, it's.
yeah, I've seen that.
nuts.
I've seen that. The house behind mine, it rents out and it'll have 6 cars in the driveway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Seen that.
Already, it's an important issue. Do we have an understanding of where we're going first?
Sort of, can we just restate that?
I
So
would
that we
think
do.
get some guidance from Vermont League of Cities and Towns
Okay.
as to if we do something now, will that be squashed by whatever the state does? Not that I want that to happen, but if we do something now, will it
The Trump,
withstand the state's perspective? And I've got a lot of information I can send to you. It'll take some time to put together, but every time there's a new, like Woodstock putting one together or other towns, Andy for some reason sends it to me. And maybe they're helpful, but I totally agree that it's an issue. It's a bigger issue in some other places.
Yeah, I believe Londonderry already. I don't know exactly.
think they
where they're
did,
at.
yes.
I think that they have initiated one.
But
already.
isn't that the basis of what brought the planning commission to
I don't know that it's 100% that. I think
whose other stuff?
it was a.
Other stuff.
Things. Yeah,
Okay.
Other stuff.
I think it's 6 years worth of work that.
That was just thrown out the window and they were like, why do we do all this if you're not going to accept any of it? And, you know, so, yeah, it hurt my feelings too if I worked hard on something and then people who had nothing to do with it just said, nah, no. And, you know, so, I was also supposed to ask you guys about the housing stock survey or the short-term rental survey we're supposed to do, or pay someone to look into how many there are. Was that something we were still doing, or are we doing something like that?
I don't know whether it
Not
got
sure where
that
that
far. Have you talked to Gordon about it?
Well, Gordon asked me to ask you guys where we, because he said you guys were gonna do one, and he was asking where we were with it.
Are you referring to so I think at one point we were talking about reaching out to some sort of organization that can help put a registry together and manage it.
No, we were
Do that.
just trying to find out how many there were in town, so we have an idea of how many.
Well, I think that was a component of it. And I remember sort of pointing at you, not to say that it was exactly you. I don't recall who it
You're
was.
making up for me, Tom.
What we're looking at.
I got it. I'm
No,
more,
I don't remember exactly who it
I
was.
don't know
but
where
do-
you'd go. Where would you go?
Well, no, I'm saying, I remember someone mentioning that the cost of finding an organization to do that was
I
in the
remember
tens of thousands of dollars.
Because-
And I think that's where we left it. We were like, well, that's just too much.
Right, yeah, what we're.
So I don't think that we've done anything.
Okay, then I'll let them know what they're looking for. We're looking for, and Peter, I don't know if Peter was there or not. Peter, were you at the meeting? I don't think you were. We're looking for how many houses are in town? How many houses in town are people living in them? How many houses in town are people with second homes that no one ever stays in but the occasional person who comes there who owns a second home? And how many there are that are short-term rentals?
Valuable information, a ton of work to do.
Ton of work, but that's what they need to make decisions on certain things for the housing.
Who's gonna do it?
I don't know.
How would you do it?
How would you do it? I mean, it's tough.
How would you do it?
It's tough. You door to door knock,
A survey that you'd send out and you'd have to rely on somebody giving you
actually doing it. Yeah, and that's tough.
Sending a survey out, how many people are not even gonna respond? Is it a third?
Right.
Just about everybody.
Right,
Just about
everybody.
everybody, right.
Mhm.
Throw it
I'm,
away.
I'm one of the few that actually responds to those. I'm one of the few people. So.
You're special.
We haven't,
I like doing them.
we haven't come to a conclusion, we haven't come up with an answer on this issue.
No.
Well, let's do the Vermont cities and towns thing first. Do you want to do that, Peter?
Sure.
What about realtors? Because I know people that have short-term rentals, they have realtors about the potential.
Sometimes they use realtors, sometimes they used to use online registries, sometimes they used to use like Craigslist. Sometimes it's like for just signs in front of their house. It's.
If you went to
so random.
VRBO,
It's
would
all
they
over the
give you
place.
any information? I doubt it.
No. You can count how many are on there, but then sometimes they're the same ones are also on Airbnb. And some of the same ones are also at realtors. And some of them are just online, just you gotta find them. You know, yeah, it's tough.
Do we know how other jurisdictions have approached this survey idea?
I think we get the gist of that from Vermont Cities, League of Cities and Towns. Because they communicate with everybody, but we certainly could call other places like, let's pick them. I would say pick Stowe because according to my info, Stowe has 900 of them. And it's about the same size town as Manchester, maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah. They have a lot more condos that have been built over the years there than we have here, so. there's a lot
Yes,
of those
because it's the
condos.
town and the ski area are combined now.
Right, so that's,
Instead of declarations, narrow it down a little bit for us. Could you get that from the state?
I think you could, wouldn't you be able to rent out your place even though you're a homestead, not a non-homestead person? I think you could still do a short-term rental.
yeah.
Yeah, you could.
Wilbur, Victoria Silsby has her.
Victoria? Victoria?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Don't we have a neighbor super close to us that has a registry, AKA the village?
The village did something on this, but I understood that they have an extremely small number of short-term rentals in the village, extremely small. And then they
Well,
put in
I
place.
think, yeah, not only that, but I think they had a really low percentage, if not close to zero, of people that actually registered.
Correct.
So my point is, it might be worth asking the village, unless you already know the answer, Wilbur, is to find out what they did wrong so that we could do it right.
That's a good perspective. I think I'd try to find somebody who was successful and find out what they did right. But they had, I heard the number was 18 pieces of information they sent out, and I think they got 0 responses. But getting other information is really important. And maybe we start with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They'll give us a lot of info, I'll bet you. Other issues from the minutes?
From the minutes, Peter, you said you were on the back page, another business, you were gonna look into what other towns are doing about noise control throughout Vermont. You ever a chance to do that?
No, I actually have not.
That's okay. That's okay.
Some do have ordinances, but there's a state quiet hour after 11.
Seems like 10 o'clock's a good time to me. 11 seems a little late. You know, if you-
I think it's a good issue,
yeah,
basically tied to the short-term rental business.
right.
Your
right.
example.
Well, and then there's Hildene. You know, they have all those weddings in the tent. They go on.
I hear them from my house a mile away. I can hear
Oh,
them.
I hear them from my house.
Yeah.
The
But that's
event,
not- I'm not in the village.
I heard a number of complaints about the event that happened at Oscar Johnson's old house. You know which one that, you know what that one
I
is?
heard that too.
We should look into that. Why are you smirking?
Because I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
Oscar Johnson's, if you go all the way down Richfield Road, and then you meet up with River Road,
Right at the end, okay.
right to the right, that was Oscar Johnson's house, and he owned the company that's now Suburban Propane.
Okay.
And somebody bought it and has made it into an event facility.
mhm.
Big time.
So the house or
Right,
across?
There's
right
an
on the
event
road,
part.
and then up behind the tents and stuff, it's big, and there was an event about a month ago now where
July 4th
somebody
weekend.
decided to do fireworks, and they weren't allowed to do fireworks, and et cetera, et cetera. There were a lot of complaints.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ready? But I think the noise ordinance is a valid issue. Anything else? Do we want to talk while we're on the minutes and it's on the agenda? Do we want to talk about the density issue? Don't everybody jump in at once.
We had someone show up at the housing, meeting, and they were talking about the density issue, how their house went from being allowed to be one house to be zoned for 10. And they were under the impression somehow that they would be forced to build 10 houses on their lot. And I don't,
No.
it was hard. She was older and I didn't know how to explain it to her, but she was very upset about it and saying that she had a hard time renting out the apartments that she had on the property because it was zoned for 10 buildings, not one anymore. I don't know. I didn't quite, she said she was going to show up tonight. She didn't come.
So my perspective on this is that the R1, RR, and RA have been turned into very large parcels by previous zoning administrator to the point where they make it difficult to utilize your property in a fashion that's fair. And if, for example, somebody owns a parcel well down Richfield Road, it's 10 acres, and that's all he has. That's his estate, and he wants to hand it to his 4 kids for housing. He can't do it. And I don't think it's right. And they're doing it because they want to have all of the increased housing in the core of the town. I just don't think it's a reality we're ready for. I don't see it either. That's not Vermont. But I want to know what other people think about this.
There's a lot of different angles on this because does the entire property perk can you put 4 houses on it and build septic on all of that? There's a certain amount of trees to build 4 houses, you have to cut out a certain amount of trees. Is that if it's rural, rural,
But don't we have design approval on those things?
we have a certain, amount of, yeah, I mean, there is. The
The state has approval on the septic system.
Yes, right.
But right now, you own a 10-acre parcel down Richfield Road. You got your house on it, that's it. You can't do a thing
Right.
with it.
I think the idea was to.
And I don't remember when this changed, but it was in, what, it was in the last
Janet
5
was here.
years?
Last couple of changes.
Yeah,
But
That's
I
pretty
think,
tough.
Janet was here when this just changed,
that
but,
was her change.
right, it was her change.
Well, let's be fair, that was the select board's change.
Right. The select board should
Yes,
vote
the
on it.
select board agreed.
They agreed on it, but I think the idea was to slow down the amount of sprawl that we would have with houses being built out and encourage building in. I understand what you're saying about leaving it to different family members. But I think it was just to discourage development outside of town and encourage development closer to the core.
So what is the parcel, Peter?
I beg pardon?
What's the parcel up behind, and I won't mention the owner's name, parcel up behind where Joe Miles is putting his 3 units up on the hill there that has sewer and water. That parcel is it R1?
I don't know it without looking at a map, but I suspect it is R1.
Yeah, I think it is too. So you got a fairly large parcel. What is it, 5 acres or something? And you're restricted to then put in 5 residences. Quite frankly, the business that you're involved in now, trying to figure out the housing stuff.
Right,
You want to put 35 residences.
Right. right.
Shared,
I think
shared
I-
buildings.
I think I'm misunderstanding what zone we're talking about. I know rural agricultural was the idea, but rural residential and R1, I think is in town, right, in that area.
It can be,
So,
but we've gone from being, I should have done this in advance. See what other towns have done here. And maybe I'll still do that. I definitely will still do that, but this is very restrictive.
yeah, it sounds very restrictive if it's in town.
And it's
Like-
gonna make the job that you guys are trying to
is.
do
It is.
much more difficult.
So can I jump in?
Can I say no or not?
You can.
It won't do any good, right?
No, listen, your chair. So I hear, so Leanne, I hear what you're saying. And I think I understand the reasoning behind.
Rural agricultural.
Yeah, making the density requirements, I guess, higher would be the right way to phrase that, right? So.
But when you call it a requirement,
1 home per 10 acres, right? But also, I also hear what you're saying. So we want to address the absolute shortage of houses in this town, because that's really the only town that we can affect, right? And yeah, we should certainly be having a really open and honest and frank discussion about the density requirements for these 3 zones. And I'm certainly open to that. I think the only thing that I would ask the 3 of you is that if we're going to look at reducing those density requirements for those zones, that we look at it for every single zone.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't.
That every single
personally believe-
zone, or every other zone is,
Elias.
Not every other zone, but just
Elias, can you
every,
give a
So if we're looking
map
at-
of the zones,
yeah.
you have that anywhere handy?
I'd have to get the laptop. I was actually also gonna bring up some of these zones, there are caveats to that. Like the one is, so rural residential, it's a 5 acre zone, but you can have 3 dwelling units if you do 50% protection on your property, so. There's some,
Right, we did with
It's
trees.
not as black and white as it
Right,
sounds
right.
sometimes. So my point is that I don't want to see, I don't think generally speaking, the vast majority of people want to see our fields and our forests cut down the further and further you go outside of town, but I do understand that the point that people are making, and I generally agree with it, that we need to give people the opportunity to build homes. The
But-
more inventory we have, the lower it will cost for people to buy homes. It won't lower people's property values, but the more inventory we have, the more stock we have, the more supply we have.
Here's the catch to that. What we found is that when that was allowed, the houses that were being built up on a hillside with a long driveway, very expensive to do that.
Sure.
They were usually big, expensive second homes that would cut out a lot of trees, and then you'd see it from miles away as you're driving through town, you'd see that house. It wasn't housing stock like we need.
I don't disagree. Is there, can you think of a way that we can,
Do we have design
as we're
criteria?
talking about this, that we can try and mitigate examples?
We could all, we
Have
could,
a Design.
You know, we also have restrictions on the steepness, the grades that are allowable.
Elevation.
You know,
Yeah.
elevations, so you could protect it a little differently and putting maybe more restrictive elevation requirements, more restrictive on the grades, that type of thing.
So is that under the purview of the design review body board?
Yes, absolutely, to discuss those.
but
But they go based off of what.
Of what we come up with here.
Select board.
we come up with rules here, select board approves it, design review board then.
You're building the ordinance, the rules by which those are carried out.
Do you
But
think,
I wanted to comment before we get too far afield that we've got a number of items on here. I almost think that at the end of the meeting, I'd like to circle back and pick
Yeah, we're working off the agenda.
pick one or two items that we really want to focus energy on. And maybe the other items will have to take a bit of a back seat work-wise.
understood. I was gonna ask Elias if he could take a look at these three categories and as Thomas pointed out, maybe some of the other categories, there one office industrial is 20,000 square feet, which is approximately half an acre, but look at these, the point that you just brought up about having three houses on that are a 5 acre zone through some caveat. But I think maybe getting some more information, because I think that information will also be beneficial to the housing committee. Could you do that?
Yeah, you mean like synthesize this a little bit so it's easier to understand?
Even this document, just to make sure that they
Okay,
have that available.
yep.
And what's the process? I mean, the issue of sending, of somebody building the 5 acre parcel and they build this road and they go up here and all you see is the road and this huge house up there of 10,000 square feet. Don't we have control over that?
We do to an extent. I mean, the road is gonna be built and the ordinance speaks to how that road must be built, right? So as long as they stay within the confines of the ordinance, they can go ahead and build that road.
Okay, so you're pushing us away from that. We've skipped over three.
Mr. Chairman,
Pay for parking in the town core. That's something you put in, I didn't. So go ahead, lead.
okay, so there's an ability for a business to come into town in the town core. What inclusive of the town core is mixed use one, town center, and the downtown area. And they kind of basically say that you can get a buy if you're under 1,500 square feet and no parking is really required for that. So I'm thinking that we need to kind of revisit that and maybe, and I know some of the discussion was, the downtown is a really sensitive area. We have a brand new parking area in back of the Walgreens and that's getting a lot of use. I wonder if there's a way that we can approach either local businesses or even the school for that matter to see if there's a lease that we can enter into to create additional parking. The school is interesting to me because it would be kind of the reverse of what the town needs on a weekend and holiday basis.
It's again, the same thing as you want to assemble all this information and what the assets are and the usage and to do that's a ton of work. And yes, it may be very valuable info once you get it, but how do we get it? I don't know. You're supposed to answer that question.
Yeah, no, it's gonna take some work to get to that. So I think what I'm asking is, let's choose what projects we want to come up with, and then we can focus in our energy to get one done at a
I know
time.
that Tim wanted us to look at this. Do we then turn around to him and say, we've talked about it, there's a lot of work to be done to assemble the data to try to figure out what to do? Is there a chance that his group, his board might be able to do some of that?
What is the priority of this board right now is
What's the next item on it's number 3 on the agenda, I think. I don't know, you tell me.
I can ask Tim if see if anybody would be interested in helping get a inventory of parking and where we might be able to work collectively on that.
I'm not sure that I'm completely following the discussion here. So the agenda item says pay for parking in the town core. Can you just kind of back up a little bit and understand what that means? What
We have a provision
We're
in
actually-
the ordinance where if you don't have on-site parking, you can pay the town
Mhm.
a fee. I think the last one that had that was the new restaurants going in.
Right.
They were short 8 parking spots.
So this is in our zoning.
This is in our
This is something
zoning that
is
you have the
permitted.
ability, if you're in the core,
Mhm.
you can elect to have to pay for parking. If you're over.
Make it known that you're paying for an imaginary lot.
Correct. We're not, in some instances, we're not able to create those lots. Parking is interesting study. I'm of the belief that if we're talking about parking and we have a lot of people in town, they're gonna park their car once and they're gonna walk. And that's really what we want as a business community is to have people walking. That's where all the ancillary purchases are made, I believe.
Yes.
So what we could do to help facilitate that is maybe better signage for parking that are, I don't know the answer.
What was the big to-do with Subway and all that and the parking over there and Starbucks? There was a huge, they were gonna cancel the whole thing and
There was,
Well,
the
you're
town
thinking,
owns 3 buildings down there and there's some parking that's available there. And that's kind of put an impact on, go ahead, Leon.
I know you're going with the town owns the buildings. Now, I heard we were selling those, but we didn't sell them, did we? We still own those buildings?
We still own those.
Okay. Can we put a sign out on the street that says public parking and points to that lot? In order to encourage people pulling into town to just pull in there and park. And know they can park there and then walk around to shops, because some shops, like, don't really want you parking in their lot and then walking around to other shops. Because when you walk around to other shops from one lot, you end up taking up that space that shop needs.
I
Like
think
if
that's,
someone parked at Cold Cow and then they walked over to, Hague's, like Karen wouldn't be very happy about that but that's what's happening.
Well, I don't think people will say, well, I've gotten my ice cream cone, I parked it here at this
Right.
lot, I'm not gonna get back in my car.
Sometimes they do, but and it would be nice if there's a public town space right there when you pull in to see that. And know they can park in that space and then walk to anywhere and leave their car all day long.
I think you're right. I think we should identify town parking spots more readily.
I
Right.
think that's.
I think that's a no-brainer.
Can you
Particularly
ask
in that
Gordon,
area now.
because
Pardon?
he's the selling agent for those, can you ask Gordon whether that's something we can do? Well, seriously, he is.
I think Jeff Williams would be able to put a parking sign there, but
No, I meant, is it okay for it to be done?
I can't imagine why it couldn't.
It might, if we sell the building, it might go away, but
But for now,
there's probably
it's gonna
20 or
solve
40
problems.
spaces there and let them be used. I think that's a good idea.
But you have a bigger issue in this town. Like the original idea was that downtown center where Factory Point Bank was, like there wasn't enough parking there, right? So all of those businesses urban other businesses, like the Christos plan. It's not 8 spots that they need, it's gonna be like 20 spots. And Shaw's is gonna be burdened by those 20 spots. If Christos pays in, like, that money isn't going to build a new parking lot somewhere at that end of town. So back in the 80s and 90s, the board, the development review board, they were very thoughtful and they monitored everyone's parking allotment. Like our building noms would have gotten turned down multiple times, right? And then it finally passed. A business needs to have its own.
Did they disconnect?
The issue came up.
We can certainly add that in, but I think we need to. Well, anyways, we can certainly add something like that in because it is in zoning. My understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the payment in lieu of parking, the theory, or the idea, and I'm not going to be 100% correct here, is that that money is intended to go towards renovating parking spaces or potentially, I would hope this part, but buying land to turn smaller lots into parking spaces. Now, I want to back up a little bit again and say a couple of things here, and I know that not everyone will agree with me. But I think it's also important to understand, or at least consider, that the less parking that we have, yes, it does burden businesses and almost everyone drives from one spot to the next. I don't know what percentage of that is, but it is the vast majority of people. But if you're looking at the cost or the revenue that the town will bring in per square foot, in terms of property taxes, it is significantly higher if we're talking about a building rather than having parking lots here and parking lots there and parking lots there. Which I think would be something that as a town, we should take into consideration as well. The actual costs of bringing in, of putting in a parking lot, which brings in less property tax and less revenue for the town. But again, on the flip side, yes, that does put a burden on some businesses who have larger parking lots versus some who don't. And yeah, the property that was able to make a payment in lieu of parking, just like every other business, because it's part of our zoning, and the DRB followed what we had recommended to the select board and the select board had agreed to at the time. Sure, it's certainly going to be a burden on Shaw's, and I've even heard from another business owner who is not even in the town, but is adjacent to this location, but wasn't aware because they're in the village.
I'd like to move on.
So-
I want to, this started because of the Shaw's Christo's town issue with $2,000 per space going to the town. Shaw's was never consulted on this issue. it's an inappropriate number. There's a sensitivity on the part of the DRB. What do we do? They've come to us and said, what are your opinions, et cetera. I didn't like it at all. I said that at a previous meeting. I said it as a person, not as a commissioner or
Yeah,
chair. But it's,
are you talking about the amount of money they paid or the idea that they had to get?
no, I'm talking, just a sec. I'm
Payment-
talking about
payment in lieu
the
of-
fact that they never talked to their neighbor. Chris's never talked to Shaw's. The town never talked to Shaw's, as best I know.
I
That's-
didn't talk to Shaw's.
Who did?
I did.
Yeah, maybe so after the fact, but that wasn't part of the deal. The town didn't, I don't think, and I know that Christos didn't.
Clarify, when we put this out for public hearing, the owner of the property is notified.
That's right. I'm sorry. I'm wrong on that. It was the owner of the property who was down in Boston,
Went to the accountant's office.
right, and who didn't know, didn't care,
They're
didn't
the-
respond.
They're the responsible party.
Right.
So
so-
statute, the way it reads is
We should have gone to the local manager who would have said, I can't give up 10 or 12 spaces.
Right.
that's a foregone conclusion that we've arrived at just now. I don't believe that anyone would know that in advance. I think that before, they should have had the discussion, I think. But what the town can do is to make the owner of the property aware what's before the DRB.
I think it would be somewhat embarrassing if other businesses in the very condensed downtown space were said, you can buy a parking space for $2,000. It's over here. Would you like to do that? And people are going to jump on that, and the parking space may not even be ours to sell, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't a good deal.
So is it your position then that you cannot have a business that's gonna warrant 5 spaces if you only have 4?
I think it's a key example of necessary planning along with the DRB and the select board and maybe John Burnham too, to talk about how you're going to fix this, because it keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And it's an issue. We're not going to solve it tonight, but
It's a pyramid scheme.
pardon me?
It's a pyramid scheme. And that's the best way to look at it. And it's not, the only person at the top is benefiting. Everybody under that is losing a space. And the only way to really to fix this is to not allow development in a spot for a building that you need more spaces than you can build on that property.
I think you need to take the payment in lieu out.
Yes,
Until you can come up with
right.
a plan.
I think any building that's built should only be built to a size that it can have parking on its own property for that parking. So, you
So
know,
it would be quite normal for somebody to have said to Christos, okay, you want to put in this restaurant and this apartment building, where are you going to get the 20 spaces you need?
right, maybe you should just put in the restaurant or just the apartments, not both.
And it should have been up to them to find parking. spaces.
Exactly. And it shouldn't be up to the town. And it's just going to cause a headache for us legally down the road. Because we could get sued by Shaw's, even though we notified them, we didn't really.
No,
notify
I
them.
disagree. I think we legally notified them. We followed statutory. I mean, listen, I get the notion that if, I have concerns about this because it's my impression that someone has been going to Shaw's and telling people inside the store that the town has allowed this family to all of a sudden say, oh, you can park at Shaw's. And that's flat out false. And in fact, that's a little embarrassing.
You mean
I
they're
think to
saying
hear
that
that someone has, yes.
the Christos
Yes.
family is saying
Yes,
that-
I have been in that store and I have had multiple employees come up to me and say, I'm concerned. I've been told by someone who's come in and said the town has made it possible and legal for a business next door to say that they are going to be parking here. Like this is the solution, which is in fact 100% false. So I want to stick up for the statutory process here. The town did what they're required to do. Now, if we want to
Wait a
change
minute, wait a
that,
minute,
that
wait.
process. So the town, again, the town
Did the town have the right
notified
to,
corporate.
had the right to sell Shaw's parking spaces?
No,
The town did
that's not
not
what
sell
happened.
Shaw's.
In reality, it is.
It is.
It is. That's what
It is
happened.
what
It may not have been what the ordinance says or the rules say, but that's what happened.
That's what happened.
Christos is gonna be parking at Shaw's. They paid $2,000 a space for it.
And Shaw's just paid to repave their parking lot
The select.
out of their own money, but
to-
they're not getting any money from these parking spaces that we sold. It's just not fair.
The intent behind that money is to renovate town parking spaces
know that.
and to build more parking spaces. I think it's.
But think of the
patently
reality,
false
Thomas.
To
They're-
suggest that the town took $2,000 a parking spot and said that they're going to let you park at Shaw's.
They in effect did.
They
may not have said
that's
it.
different than
They-
saying it, and that's completely different
that's
than
right.
someone
But
in this
it's the
town
closest
walking into
parking space, and that's where it's gonna
saying that
happen.
That's exactly what happened.
That's where it's gonna go.
Any privately owned property is able to control and maintain and manage their own
Correct.
spaces. If the Shaw's store decided that they can determine that they're not shopping in their place, that they can have them removed, I would imagine.
I realize this is getting contentious at this point, so let me back up again. I understand that we have concerns about payment in lieu of parking. But if we're going to talk about, if we want to start talking about this, and I think that we should, I think that this should be maybe an entire meeting where we talk about what this looks like, why it should potentially be changed. But we're heading in the direction of saying you can only build a structure if you have 100% of the currently required parking spaces. Because we can change the required parking
You can
spaces
do that,
at
but-
our will with the approval of the select board.
That's how it used to be. If you didn't have the park, you couldn't do your business in this town. There was a big thing with.
My concern is that we would get to a point where we're full of parking lots.
I don't think I agree with that, but I also don't agree with that being the rule because you're gonna push away people. They're not gonna be able to open a store where we want to have stores.
Yeah,
But
sure.
maybe we should be meeting with the DRB to talk about this.
Joint meeting?
Joint meeting?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because you have your shared parking calculation that you can use as well. And you can, like, that's what my lot's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a shared parking lot with Ronald Rodriguez, but it doesn't work out that way.
Ready?
It would be,
Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
We're ready to move on. Discussion of town plan. Who would like to start? I'll start.
I think you should start.
I should. I went through the town plan several months ago. I've gone through it again in more detail this time, taken a lot of notes, and I want to encapsulate my perspective or my findings by saying that a lot of work has been put into this thing. I personally think it's verbose and very wordy where it doesn't have to be. And I think, and we've talked about this before, we got a sample of the Malta plan. We need to get samples of other plans, probably in Vermont than Malta, but the Malta plan, the difference between that and this was the Malta plan said, here's where we are. Here's probably what we want to be, and now how do we get there? I don't believe this plan does that. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit.
I agree with you, but I also think the first thing we need to figure out is where we want to go.
Yep.
And that's what people in this town want. People moved up here for the quiet and the peace of a small Vermont idyllic town.
I agree with you there, but I do think there are a number of places in this town plan where it says specifically what we want to be or what we're good at and therefore attracts people. But it doesn't talk specifically how we get that bigger or better or continue it or whatever. I just think where are we going and how we're going to get there? The how we're going to get there isn't defined enough in here.
I agree,
And-
but I don't even think they have a solid basis, and maybe because I don't know the history of deciding where we want to go.
That, and I agree with you on that, because it's not in here of where we want to go. And I think Wilbur and I sat down a while back and we talked about this. We had a meeting and we just chatted it up just casually about what the town is, in our opinion, and where it is. And when you said people move here for the solitude and peace and quiet, well, maybe Vermont as a whole, the idea of Vermont maybe, but Manchester is a resort town. And you don't move to a resort town for peace and quiet. You move here for to be surrounded by nature, but also to have things to do and
I agree
events,
with
you know.
that, but if you want all the stuff they talk about that we need in here, you'd go to Rutland or Bennington. I mean,
Right, those things. But I think as Manchester itself, it is primarily, you know, at its business core, a resort town. You know, on the business side of things, there's families here and it's a family town, but it's also.
I agree with that, but I think that's also part of why you come here, because you realize that you understand there's the activities and there's the golf and there's the skiing and that kind of thing. So it's like, what are they saying here now that we're going to change all this somehow?
I don't know if we want to change it. I think as far as our focus of what we want to be and where we're going to go, we need to keep in mind of what we are. and
I
what-
agree, but
and
where are they coming up with who's deciding what we want to be?
The townspeople they would suggest what they see
Did that happen
Manchester.
before this was drafted?
I think.
No, that's one
yeah.
thing we would have to do. We have to get public input on what we think, not what we think, what they think
Right.
it should be. Yes, that is a step. I'm gonna throw a bomb on the punch bowl here, but I would like to consider having a new set of eyes on this. The select board has said they might only want it to be slightly polished.
No.
It hasn't been-
Wait, let me just finish. That's something that was brought up. Maybe that's not their final determination. My perspective would be, I'd like to have a new set of eyes on this. Because I think if you don't do that, if you go back to the same people who did this and have done a number of them very similar in Vermont, you're just gonna get the same thing all over again.
And
I mean, you can
cookie
go through
cutter.
here and correct punctuation, but it's still not, it's a worthless document.
Yeah. You said it.
Do you have a comment?
I do. I just want to make sure, I don't think that anyone intended for it to sound like this, but I want to make sure that when we're talking about the town plan, we're not just talking about the people that come here or the businesses that are operating here or the type of market that we are, but also continuing to think about the long-term impact that these changes we're discussing when it comes to the town plan, have on the people that have lived here and will continue to live here for generations.
It's a really good point. And it's not going to be easy, but we have to make an effort to get public input on this. And
100%.
this is, no offense, Karen, but this is pathetic. We
And I
need to
completely-
have a lot of
Yeah.
people sitting there and we need to have people waiting there to talk about it.
100%. Yeah.
Hey, Wilbur.
Victoria, speaking of which,
Yep, Victoria,
I'd like to share a personal story and a professional story of how the town plan affected and allowed the town of Manchester to reword with respect to the health and well-being of both residents of Manchester and visitors. I don't know how many years ago. I'm guessing, I can't remember when the town reworded and revised and adopted new language in all their ordinances, but I'm guessing it was 6 years ago, maybe more. And the reason why the town, actually, John O'Keefe called me at the collaborative and asked for some technical assistance on this was that there was maybe 2 short sentences in the town plan at the time. And the 2 or 3 sentences spoke to public health and well-being. Subsequently, that's one of the reasons why Manchester Rec Park and the other parks are smoke-free. That's why you can't smoke and drink in the Applejack Stadium. And that is a real life story of a huge success of John O'Keefe looking at the town plan that he had to work with at the time to say, oh, this is allowed and the town plan supports this work. And for months, we worked with the select board, providing suggested language and technical assistance to help rewrite, I think it was 4 ordinances, including prohibiting at the time, which doesn't work anymore, cannabis retail outlets right across in those little stores from MEMS. So the town plan works. It is a tool, like Thomas said, for the residents and the visitors and the families and the grandparents and the single people and the widows and the widowers and the dogs and the animals. And I wanted to share that because I'm not sure anyone that's sitting at on the planning commission today was in the chairs when the select board rewrote the ordinances. But
Thank you very much, Victoria. We've got to move along. Okay, I'm sorry. I want to talk about how we do this economically. Do you think that the select board might be receptive to a small stipend from an outside firm taking a look at this and telling us what we should do? Not reinventing it, not rewriting it, but saying, here's what we might want to think about doing. Do you think there's going to be reception to that?
I did not think that there would be prior to this, but maybe the time is right to ask.
Okay, I have another perspective on this. First of all, I think we need to meet more frequently on this issue. And I want to know from people here at the table how often you'd like to meet going forward.
Specifically about the town plan.
Maybe, or just planning commission meetings. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, whether you just come together to meet just on the town plan and don't get digressed on other things. I don't know, but I don't think this was a month-long span between, and I don't think that's in our best interest.
I don't know.
And so I want to know what people want to do. Do you want to go every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks? What do you want to do?
Every 2 weeks is good.
No offense, Karen, but I'm asking these people.
I don't know.
Are you?
That was very good. You woke me up.
Unless you want to take this seat over here, the empty seat, yeah.
So what do you want to do? Okay, then I'll switch to something else because I'm not getting a response from anybody.
Oh, I was sorry. I was waiting because you had turned.
I'm gonna talk this one.
Yeah.
I'm open to meeting every 2 weeks, and I actually do think that it might behoove us to focus on maybe one topic at a time.
Okay, so
And just
next,
have longer discussions, as long as we all, particularly myself, do a better job of trying to keep it less contentious when we get into certain details.
we limit you to the number of vocals and syllables you can use.
Sure.
What about having breaking up into pairs and talking outside that environment about our things and then coming together as a foursome?
I mean, maybe I would.
We can do that.
I think sunshine is a good disinfectant. And I'm not suggesting that by working in pairs is a bad thing, but I think the more often that we have open discussions here in public.
Good point, but if we came to this meeting of 4 with some very specific things that have already been discussed and
Sure.
put on the table and say, here's what we think we have to dive into, or here are the problems, here's what we like, we can ignore this, we have to change this, et cetera, I think we'll make more headway than doing it the way we're sitting here now.
I think two people in a work group can then come and then explain what they came up with to the other two people, and that's in public, in that way, because,
The group of four would have to be public, but
yeah, right,
Two
it's
groups
still
of
would
two
explain
doesn't
it
have to
to each other in the public view, of what we've come up with, what we've looked at, or what we've discussed.
Sure, I mean, I think as long as those two are willing to discuss also the things that they may have decided to exclude or thought that was too much of a con to bring to the table.
okay. I would like to propose that you and Leon meet as a group when you want to. And Meg and I will meet and try to then come back in 2 or 3 weeks. What do you want? To talk about what we've come up with. And we're not gonna do the whole thing in that first exercise. We might get a third of the way through it. But I think we can make some real progress that way. No,
What is the specific, are there specific topics you're?
it's up to you when you sit down and say, we can leave this alone.
We just pick two of the topics.
There's several pages on making sure the night skies are not, come on. There are several of those things in there. But I just think we might make more headway doing that. And there are certain things you're gonna just discard, throw away, not trouble yourself with. And then there are the real core issues, which you might come to the group and have a perspective, but who knows what's gonna happen at that point.
Sure.
Until we know what the people of Manchester see in their vision for the town, how can we be going down this?
Good question, but I don't think we can communicate with them effectively until we have a really good knowledge of this document, what we think is wrong with it and what's right with it, and then go to them. We can't just bring them in and say, what do you think? What should we do?
No, we talked about this last time, that some kind of a survey with a question and some
Yeah,
options and.
right, options.
So direct their thoughts,
But we
not
have to
just,
come
here's a
come up
blank
with the
piece.
options first, and that's what I think the discussion's about, is come up with the options that
Right.
we would then give people and let them decide which ones they think are the best.
Right, I think that's,
We have to educate ourselves more before we can do that.
If we don't weed
You may
out,
be educated, but I don't, and he may be educated. I know we're as educated as, because he's got history and she's done a lot of work on it. Maybe not as educated as we need to be, to then go to the populace and say, here's what we think, or here's what we want to hear from you.
you can have the other section in there that for other, but by having a list of things, you don't get bombarded by, say, if you send out 300 people, 300 different ideas, you get an idea of what they want. You get some extra ideas in there too in the other section, but you won't have just everything hitting you at once, and you can't really make a focused town plan.
I would see we going to the town with people are only gonna read so much, maybe a 3 or 4 page document
Right.
at the most, saying, here's what we think. We've got a town plan. Here's a brief description of it. Here are the issues that we think can be improved, et cetera. We'd like your input. We might be totally wrong, who knows? But you gotta give them something to chew on, and you can't give them an encyclopedia. They'll never read it, and on and on.
no, I agree with all of that, but I think that's a very important piece of all of this. Until we start dissecting this, that, and the other, it goes back to what's the vision for the town? And
What do the
that's not,
people want?
that's not our job to
Right.
decide.
What do the people want? Yes,
Victoria has her hand up again.
okay, Victoria?
It seems we have an possible expert in the Zoom room tonight. And Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I'm assuming regrowth planning has something possibly with assisting towns. And perhaps Michael could share some perspective on best practices when towns are in this quandary of, we have a town plan, but we don't know how to go forward with next steps on figuring it out. So apologies, Michael, I don't know you. I don't know if you know anyone else in the room or the meeting tonight, but I'm assuming
Victoria,
you have some.
I'm gonna interrupt, Victoria. I know that Peter has had discussions with Michael on exactly this topic. So thank you for your perspective. We're already engaged into that process of how somebody else can help. I don't know whether it's gonna be him or someone else. But that, what you just proposed is already in process. I think, would that be correct to say, Michael?
I just wondered if it could be shared publicly then.
Not yet, no, because we're not at that point.
We're gonna be putting out an RFP for a municipal planning grant. And I think the applications have been delayed till December. So at that point in time, we'll be sending something out to get this process moving. And it's gonna be putting us under the gun for a delivery of sometime in May of 25, but I'm not sure what we can do on our own in the interim.
It might be in two phases, Sylvia, Victoria. It might be a very brief guideline on how we proceed going forward into the bigger picture. And then the bigger picture needs an RFP of probably significance that we're gonna help with from a grant. But we'll see. And yes, it will become public at a certain point where we don't have enough to communicate right now what we envision doing. We don't know the answers yet. Already? Any other comments, issues? Do we want to get out 2 minutes early?
Yes.
You didn't have to stay, Karen.
For everything?